There's so much noise out there for everything. Without a doubt, the best thing is a word of mouth recommendation. When someone that you trust says, "Oh, I think you'd really like this," it's going to have a lot more weight to it than 42 different advertisements coming at you. I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place to advertise what you do and do it well. If you create something that has a positive impact on people, they're going to tell other people about it. And that's by far the best.
When you create software, say the state-of-the-art approach to that is create what's called an MVP, which is a minimum viable product, and then improve it on the go and with the feedback of the marketing.
The book and the software are a little bit different. A book, you're right, once it's out there, it's quote unquote done, and that's it. The software is wonderful because you can constantly enhance it based on feedback. And if it's never out there, then there's no way to give feedback. If your fear is that you can't do something until you've got it perfect, you're never going to make any progress. And so in the writing space for me, I always tell people write first and edit second. Don't write one paragraph and then go back through and edit it and edit it and edit it until it's perfect, and then write a second paragraph. Write the entire book, be in that state of flow as best you can, and then go back and start working on improving it. Failure is just staying where you're at, in my experience. Whatever the place is that I didn't want to be in, I wanted to be somewhere else. But I was so afraid that I'd fail in the process of getting to somewhere else that I didn't want to take any steps. But that by in and of itself is failure.
As a serial entrepreneur, I'm always trying to evolve. Having great conversations with other high performers is one of the best ways to grow, not only in business, but also in spirit, health, and relationships. This is Svencast. Listen, grow, repeat. We're live with John Strelecky. John, welcome.
Thanks, Sven. Great to be here. Great to see you.
Thank you. So to introduce you a little bit for those who still need an introduction, you're a best-selling author, a very special best-selling author. You've written inspirational books like The Cafe on the Edge of the World and Big Five for Life, which is very inspirational for me personally. Your books were translated into over 42 languages, sold more than 6 million copies worldwide. They have won Bestseller of the Year awards 5 times. I mean, get that 5 times. And collectively spent more than 800 weeks, 800 on bestseller lists, including more than 250 weeks in the #1 spot. That's amazing. Congratulations to that. I mean, this is like, I'm talking to the most successful author ever.
Thank you. I owe it all to the amazing people associated with the projects. I have an incredible publisher. I have an incredible translator who takes what I write and translates it into the German language for the folks that are in the German-speaking territories. And I have an amazing fan base. I can't tell you the number of times that I've done a book signing, and when I ask people, "How did you hear about the book?" they say, "My best friend gave it to me," or they're there with their best friend and they say, "Well, I gave it to my best friend," or so it's just, it's really awesome. I mean, how did you hear about it? Did someone give it to you? Did you find it on a bookshelf somewhere?
Oh, actually, my personal assistant is a big fan of yours, and she recommended it. And she was like, "Oh, you're starting a podcast. Please talk to John Strelecky. Like, he's the most amazing guy and stuff." So, yeah, so word gets around, and like it seems like you have this viral effect. Everyone is looking for the viral effect, kind of online and with videos and with YouTube. No, it's also possible with books.
Yeah,
that's the cool thing.
I'll tell you what, there's so much noise out there these days for everything. And I think without a doubt, the best thing, because there is so much noise, is a word of mouth recommendation. When someone that you trust says, "Oh, I think you'd really like this," then it's going to have a lot more weight to it than 42 different advertisements coming at you. I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place to advertise what you do and to do it well. But if you create something that has a positive impact on people, they're going to tell other people about it. And that's by far the best.
Yeah. But that really requires that the content you create or the product you create or the service is really excellent. It has to be really, really good for people to recommend it without an incentive. This is like the big thing, right?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I'm a fanatic when it comes to my writing. I just finished actually the 4th book in the Cafe series, which will be coming out in May of 2022. And I'll tell you, Sven, when I go through that process, I mean, I work at it and work at it and work at it until I'm happy with every single word in every single sentence on every single page. And when people ask me about advice for their business or advice for their writing, I always say the same thing. you've only got one shot at a first impression with people. And so don't release it. Don't release a B product if you're hoping for an A response. Work hard enough that what you have to offer is truly the best that you have to offer, because you've only got that one shot at that first impression.
Well, that's a very interesting statement to me, because I come from an industry where things work a little bit differently, a little bit, but it's actually a dilemma. Like when you create software, I have the software platform Digital24. When you create software, it's the let's say the state of the art approach to that is create what's called an MVP, which is a minimum viable product, and then improve it on the go and with the feedback of the marketing, as opposed to the so-called waterfall model, where you want to try to do everything perfect and plan out everything perfectly. Then you have thousands of pages of documentation and of specifications and stuff, and it'll take forever to build it. And once it's built, then
Right.
it's not a fit for the customer, and B, it's still not perfect. So, but with like something like a book, I can understand that it makes more sense. But I think the whole thing around perfectionism and, therefore like resulting procrastination and stuff, how do you cope with that? How do you find that line between like getting it out, but making it good enough so that it's still perfect, and not
Yeah.
procrastinate on it or become a victim of your own perfectionism? Like how do you
Well,
deal with it?
yeah, it's interesting because you're right. Software and book writing are a little bit different. And yet, I think if we were to break down the different phases, we'd find that they're actually more similar than different. In that, so for a book, for example, if I come up with an idea and I think this is something that will have a positive impact on people, then my initial phase of sort of testing that, like you're talking about a first viable product, might be that I would use it in an interview and I would see if I got great reviews coming back from that concept when I introduced it in an interview. Did I see a lot of comments on social media about it? Like, whoa, I never thought about it that way. Do I notice that the interviewer is kind of like, wow, that's really cool? And so I think the same approach probably applies, that you sort of test your material. You think you've got a good idea, and then you put it out there in a soft scale way, just enough that people can get a sense of what you're offering, and then you test it. And then the book and the software are a little bit different. A book, you're right, once it's out there, it's quote unquote done, and that's it. The software is wonderful because you can constantly enhance it based on feedback. And if it's never out there, then there's no way to give feedback.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually, very interesting to look at the two parallels, and probably there's opportunities for both to learn from each other in terms of how that works. But I would say in general, if your fear is that you can't do something until you've got it perfect, you're never gonna make any progress. And so in the writing space, for me, the example of that would be, I always tell people, write first and edit second. And so don't write one paragraph and then go back through and edit it and edit it and edit it until it's perfect, and then write a second paragraph. No. And don't even do that with a chapter. Like, write the entire book, be in that state of flow as best you can, and then go back and start working on improving it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like when I, for example, I had to learn that really the hard way when I was writing sales copy. Like I wrote a lot of sales copy in my career as an online entrepreneur, both with information products and advice products, and in software with software products. And the only approach that worked for me was write everything down, like just don't even edit anything, even a typo or something really obvious. Not even talking about, like grammar or anything. No, just typos or stupid things. Don't even start editing it, because then it will kick you out of your headspace, of your flow. And then you're in correction mode, and correction mode is like not creative mode. It's like, and this is, I think people get hung up with that. Like they really can get stuck, especially when they write a book. And it's way easier, like also for the human brain, in my experience, to process like just one thing at a time. So either you're writing and then you're creating, or you're editing. But if you mix those, then you're multitasking, and then without even realizing, because you're still thinking you're writing, right?
And I also think that there's something else that goes, I would 100% agree with you. And I think there's something else in conjunction with that in terms of the dopamine fix and happy drugs that your brain kicks off, depending on the type of work you're doing and what the feedback loop is. So if you're doing editing, the joy comes from like fixing something or finding a mistake and realizing, oh, I can just adjust that. And now I'm done. That sentence, I fixed that issue. But creative is a totally different dopamine fix. That's when you invent something. You've thought of something that hasn't existed before. When you're writing sales copy, when you're writing a book, you're starting with a blank piece of paper. And so the dopamine fix is coming up with something that's brand new. And I think that's totally different parts of the brain. So you're right. When you suddenly switch over to editing mode, it's like the brain goes, oh, well, that's easy. I can get a faster little dopamine fix from editing than I can from creative. And so it doesn't want to go back to creative. So better to stay in that space, let it all flow, and then switch gears at some point and go back to the editing space. Yeah, you can't write the second chapter until you've written the first. You can't write the second paragraph of the sales copy until you've written the first. So it's something that I've recommended time and time again because people are afraid to fail. I think that's and that's, I've been there totally. I remember that headspace a lot when I was, especially in my early 20s. But failure is just staying where you're at, in my experience from my own life, and whatever the place is that I didn't want to be in, I wanted to be somewhere else. But I was so afraid that I'd fail in the process of getting to somewhere else that I didn't want to take any steps. But that by in and of itself is failure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like the ironic thing is you need failure in order to get somewhere, in order to have success. You need failure.
Yeah.
Like you need, like, imagine a child like being eventually able to walk successfully, but before that it'll be a lot of crawling and or falling down, etc., etc. But the good thing with a child is nobody expects the child to be able to walk right away.
Right. Yeah. And learning to speak too, right? A kid learns to speak. And I think one of the things that's important to allow ourselves to remember is that learning is a unique flow, an ebb and a flow, that there are periods of explosive growth in terms of our awareness, our learnings. And this is like language learning, learning to play guitar, learning to program, learning to write well. And then there are plateaus. And then from the plateau, it may be a little frustrating, but then finally you come out of if you keep moving forward, out of the plateau, you have another explosion of progress. So the trick is to just allow yourself, and I talk about this in Das Cafe am Running Welt. This is the story of the sea turtle, that when the tide is going against you, allow yourself to just hold your position. Don't lose ground, but don't feel like you need to be paddling furiously all the time, because sometimes that's not the flow of the situation.
Yeah, sometimes you need, for example, to take a break, to go for a walk, or to sleep over something and let your subconscious work.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's not even you. Sometimes it's that there's other dynamics at play which sort of need to coalesce. And when they coalesce, then all the different pieces are exactly where they need to be, so that you can have that stroke of genius creativity to bring something from a blank piece of paper to something that's real.
I see. Thank you. So the thing is, what I still like if I would write a book, I mean, I've written one book, like an ebook in the past. I started with like a mind map and with the table of contents. Do you recommend that as well, or do you have a different approach as to like what to write about and what elements do you need?
It depends on the type of book. So for a nonfiction book, I find that process to be really valuable. I like the visual aspect of being able to look at it, whether you use Post-it notes on a wall or you use a Excel spreadsheet that sort of maps it all out. I like the ability to look and follow the storyline and say, okay, yeah, if I'm going to go from here to here, this one's a chapter about dealing with fears. This one is a chapter that ties into that because it's talking about the changes in the brain when we don't get our dopamine fix. And so you can see the whole storyline and see if it makes sense. And I've written one book that way. I wrote the sequel to the Big Five for Life book that way. And I think the reason that I did it is because I was telling a story that wasn't just of my own creation. I was in part telling a story of this amazing company called DLGL up in Montreal, Canada. But that said, when I do my other books that are just pure creative flow, I will I will know that I'm going to do the project probably for 12 months ahead of time. And during those 12 months, I keep my great idea file. And every time I think of a really cool thought, a unique piece of intellectual capital, I type it up into my Microsoft Word document and I just store it on my Mac. And then when it comes time to actually start the process of writing the book, I read through that entire document of thoughts and ideas. And then I sit down and I just start typing. And so that process is different. When I get stuck, then I go back and I look at the entire file. I'm like, oh yeah, this is a perfect spot for that idea. And I drop it in. So I think part of it is depending on the type of book you're writing, and part of it is depending on the type of person you are and the way your brain functions.
I see. Do you ever worry about, for example, having some other author or inspirational motivator or speaker that he might have come up with the same idea and you just don't know about it, or do you not care at all about that?
My guess is that if you looked across human history, as far back as we have dated material, that some thoughts and ideas have transcended cultures and time frames throughout all of human history. So the idea of asking the question, which is sort of the core question in Das Cafe I'm running about, why am I here? My guess is that's a question that people have been asking for all of eternity. So I don't think that you want to sell yourself short and say, well, somebody already asked that. Well, yeah, somebody asked it, but what's the creative way in which your genius is going to ask it? And will that way connect to someone in a way that somebody else's book doesn't? It's incredibly intimidating. If you were to walk into the Frankfurt Book Fair, for example, in October every year, there are probably 500,000 titles on display there. Yeah. And you look at your one little book and you're like, how in the world is anyone going to find my little book out of all that? But if everyone thought that, then no one would write anything down. And then we wouldn't have a chance to be doing this podcast. And there wouldn't be millions of people around the world who have been inspired by the books. You kind of just got to trust your intuition. If there's a reason it's saying to you, write this sales letter or write this book or try this entrepreneurial venture, if you're getting that kind of internal calling, there's got to be a reason. I mean, there's a million other things you could be doing. If it's that calling, if it's calling you with that much intensity, there's got to be a reason.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. It's like, for me, I answer that with everyone wants a different channel, like the message might be the same always. Because, for example, the secret to success is, like, for me, a very straightforward thing. You just have to do good work and solve a problem and have everyone know it, and as many relevant people as you can know about it, that you have the solution.
Yeah.
Like as like the basic framework, but still you as an individual, you like to listen to certain people, to certain channels, and there's people you would like to listen to and there's people who you don't. For example, I really feel sorry that I did not learn French properly when I was school, because I didn't like my French teacher. She didn't like me, so it was mutual. So yeah, it's
great example.
Unfortunate. I think if I had loved the French teacher, then I would be able to speak French really well. So
I think what you're describing is so perfect. It's like one of the challenges in life is to get enough practical life experience about something to realize how learning it is worth doing and why it's worth doing. I'm totally with you. Had I have had the chance to backpack Central and South America when I was 7 years old, I would have been so motivated to learn Spanish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's so much easier when you're a kid, but I would have seen the payoff. And so that's one of the techniques I really recommend for people, no matter what is the thing that you're striving towards, is try and immerse yourself, whether it's virtually and you're reading about someone's life story or you're watching interviews, or even better is physically being in the experience. Immerse yourself in what you think you're trying to get to. Because when you get to experience it, then you see what the payoff is. And that provides so much of the framework for why it's worth going through the struggles. Because, you learn French, you learn Spanish, you learn to write, you learned how to write a book. It's not always easy. And there's got to be a motivating presence that keeps pushing you in the tough times. So I'm right there with you. I think I think that's incredible advice. And I love your idea too about finding the teacher or the process that works for you, because there's dozens of them. I mean, we're so blessed. There are tons of if you want to be, use your example. If you want to learn French, there's probably 50 different YouTube channels about learning French.
Yeah.
You know? Find the one that they talk your language, that connects with your learning style.
Yes. And where you find the person, where you like to listen to the person. Like, I think it's a lot about, being sympathetic or not. In the following episode of Svencast,
something that I finally learned and adopted in my life as well, which is it's okay to fail. Just don't make the same mistake twice.
I feel like it's always about a decision. You have to decide to feel good as soon as possible and to work for it. And then you can do all kinds of things like taking an ice bath. You cannot feel terrible because you're just busy with surviving, for example. Happiness just happens inside your head. You don't need much more than your head. Vibration is very important, especially nowadays where like the world is under pressure. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button and never miss an episode of Svencast again.